What's up, team? Good morning, Bitcoiners. The sun is up. Bitcoin is running. We're doing great. We're doing great. All that's left to do is have a coffee, talk about what's new. Good morning, Justin. How you doing? We like to start the show with the fakest news available, but the scoop is already out there. Everyone saw one of the fakest pieces of news I've ever seen in my life, right? And the simulation definitely provided on this one because, of course, I'm talking about Greta. She's not happy still. She's upset. You know, she was at a coal mine in Germany and they had the staged arrest. But here's where the simulation decided to give us a really fun time, right? We saw everything with Andrew Tate last week getting arrested, and then he had a fight with Greta, and that's right when he got arrested. But now Greta, looks like he got all the headlines, so she had to get the headlines, and now she did it, and she got arrested too, and everyone comparing Andrew Tate's arrest and her arrest. It's really looking quite amazing. And if the simulation is real, we are guaranteed that Andrew Tate and Greta might have some chemistry. We'll see, right? We'll see. It looks like they like staged arrests, right? Well, we don't know about Andrew Tate. Who knows about Andrew Tate? But we don't spend too much time thinking about Andrew Tate, by the way, as you know on this show. We're not here for the Andrew Tate, what's happening type of content. We like Andrew Tate. We like to laugh about it, right? But we're not here trying to decipher the meaning of Andrew Tate's life. Unless it's the simulation putting him and Greta together, then we're all here for it, right? We're here for that. But luckily, I've got some backup, right? Now that everyone knows some of the fakest news ever created, I would say, right? Some of the fakest news ever created yesterday. But now that we've seen that, let me get today's notes up. Now that we've seen that, I do have other fake news, right? I'm not going to come empty-handed. I'm not going to come empty-handed to Moscow time with just the Greta story because everyone already saw that. But this one's too good to be true. We're going to talk about the WEF again, World Economic Forum. So they had, that's what we talk about a lot, right? I produce events. I produce Bitcoin's event in Miami, Bitcoin 2023, May 18th to 20th. All about finding moderators, finding speakers, right? That's what we do. And sometimes speakers who are sort of down and out, right? Someone who's not doing so great, but they used to be great, and they come and they say, Nolan, I really need help. I'm trying to break back in to the industry. Things didn't work, and I got a new idea. Any way you can mix me into the journey? I hear that a lot, right? The people come to me with that a lot. I've known people for years in this industry, and I've been producing events for a long time now. So people come and they say, I need another chance. Can you find a way to get me in the program, and I'll use it to sort of build my career? So that's totally normal, right? That's totally normal. But what I try to do when that happens is put the person in the spot that makes the most sense for them and their abilities and their history. Like if someone was a scam coin person and they want to come to Bitcoin, I'm going to put them in a spot where they really have to be honest about what they learned, about what they went through, about how they were a scammer and then they didn't. And it's like a reform thing, right? I'm not just going to put them in the same position if they made a mistake and all that stuff. I wouldn't do that. So I have sympathy. For event programmers. And it looks like the World Economic Forum fell into that trap where they had Brian Stelter. You know Brian Stelter, right? The guy from CNN. I'm Brian Stelter. Well, Brian Stelter got fired, right? Now, why did he get fired? Well, if you're in the news game, right, and this is what he was brought on to talk about at the World Economic Forum. The actual title is The Clear and Present Danger of Disinformation. And he's there with Sulzberger, right? He's on stage with Sulzberger. You know who Sulzberger is? He owns the New York Times, right? He manages to come out, his family does. He's the editor-in-chief, Arthur. He manages to come out for the World Economic Forum. No one knows who he is otherwise, right? But he comes to these things. So they're talking about the clear and present danger of misinformation. Brian Stelter, no shit, is the guy doing it. So what's the right answer for the person? What's the right job for the person who fell for every hoax ever? Brian Stelter, right? He fell for every hoax. Every one of the hoaxes out there, he fell for. He even fell for the Michael Avenatti for president hoax. This is one of the least credible news people ever. There's no doubt. He got fired from CNN for getting things wrong all the time. All the time, right? He fell for the drinking bleach hoax. He fell for the Charlottesville hoax. He fell for whatever other hoax is out there. This is the guy who just jumped in 2 feet first. He fell for hoaxes the same way he would fall for, apparently, big pizzas and whatever else he shoves in his mouth. So Brian Stelter goes to the World Economic Forum, one of the now least credible organizations out there, to interview the New York Times owner about the dangers of disinformation. You can't make this stuff up. You cannot make this stuff up. Now, people finally talking about the failure of this year's WEF, right? As we said on yesterday's show, we're all for kicking this thing when it's down. It's really good memes, right? It's really good mimetic energy. It's really helpful to isolate what's going on there. But of course, we always remind you, right? It's just a conference. We're going to talk a bit more about the business model today. Some people have deciphered it, and I'm going to share it with you. But here's just some of the reactions to this year's event, right? So remember, they're coming off a stunning failure of keynote after keynote. So they had the keynote 2 years ago was Putin, right? It was Putin. That didn't work out so well. And then it was Xi. Last year it was Xi, right? And then this year was Ursula, the EU woman. So one after the other, not really picking winners here. So here's what they said just about the event this year. This is from Unheard. And they say the Davos 2023 agenda lies in ruins. The mood at this year's WEF meeting is rather downbeat. So just going on energy, no one there, right? And that's the opposite of what we're going for in Bitcoin in Miami. We're all about energy. It's an energy show. We're going to talk about energy industry and how to make money, how to make more energy, how to use more energy, and how to get rich doing it. So that's something we're talking about. What did they talk about? Well, it's so hard if people just would use less and use, don't get ready for the Great Reset and all these other things, right? Got to do less, got to be less. And now it's just become this big joke, right? So the WEF finally becoming a punchline, and that's where that mimetic argument that we said yesterday is really beneficial for Bitcoin. Keep using it as a mimetic tool. So you've even got The Street yesterday running a headline about how Elon Musk is also throwing shade, they said, on the World Economic Forum. Elon comes up with the idea. And remember, mockery is the best way to deal with it, right? Mockery is the best way to get the mimetic energy and direct it. So Elon says, it would be great if someone could compile a game contest of who said the craziest stuff between 4chan and WEF. My money is on the latter. So he really thinks he can. And then, people saying it really would be great to have a type of reality show around or a quiz show. You can even go further, right? You could even get a show where you put all of these people into a world that looks exactly like the one the WEF is designing. And it continues to be what my hope is when World War III is over, that we put central bankers and all of these people into like incentive traps, right? Where it's like if they work a little harder at whatever it is they're doing, they actually can't go on vacation that year because it would trigger, whatever, some stupid incentive trap that normal people are stuck in these days, right? I worked a little harder and now I'm going to get taxed this much more. So maybe I shouldn't work this year and I can actually go on vacation. That kind of thing, right? It would just be fun to see these folks in incentive traps and in things that don't really make sense where they have to give something up, right? That would be great. I would be totally in for them. And it could look like that, right? You put them in a town, like a fake town, and the fake town looks like the town they wanted to build. Like you can't go 15 minutes out of town that way, and you can't go 15 minutes out of town that way. I would in the future when we are living on a Bitcoin standard and entertainment has changed its aspect, I hope we can go back to the old days still, right? I hope we haven't changed so much that we can't go back to the old days and have a little good fish out of water reality TV entertainment. That would be great, right? That would be great. So some people actually commenting again on Brian Stelter at the event as well. And Wall Street Silver said, next up, Sam Bankman-Fried will host a panel on effective altruism with other people's money. We love to laugh. We love to laugh. So Andrew Lawton came up with a bit of a breakdown of how the WEF makes money, and I'll share it with you. It's pretty interesting, and this is what I mentioned about that. It's sort of a federated council, and you get a say in the agenda, and that's more or less what Andrew Lawton breaks down here. I didn't know all the numbers over time. I'd seen them before and seen different versions, but he did a pretty good job here. He says this year, business leaders reportedly had to pay $250K each just to attend the WEF in Davos. Per the WEF, politicians get in for free. In many countries, cash for access events are illegal, yet that seems to be the entire premise of this meeting. The World Economic Forum says its mandate is to bring the private and public sectors together to shape global, regional, and industry agendas. It's not an intergovernmental organization, though world leaders arguably treat it as one. So remember, it's just an event, right? That's what I said. It's just a conference. That's why I studied it. It's important to ask what participants, the WEF's invited guests to its annual meetings in Davos, get out of it. For NGO leaders, it's an audience with business leaders, potential donors, and policymakers. For corporate executives, it's FaceTime with politicians. It's worth noting that the Davos admission fee is above and beyond the WEF membership and partnership dues, which run up to $650,000 a year. And that's the part that I was talking about. The membership is what you sell to have a place in the agenda. It doesn't get you anything as far as stage time, technically. That's what they say, but of course it does. So that's how you look at it. Now, again, as I said, the mimetic focus, the attention on WEF, while not exactly the target, right? So I continue to believe that Americans don't really need to pay attention to the WEF, that the fight for the future of governance is happening in America anyway. And I think we have enough flexibility as it is with the federated model and with our capacity to move to different states, Texas, Florida, and whoever else joins in, Wyoming, of course, and manipulate the system that way. Right? So I still think that's the focus and where things are headed and where our attention should be. But this organization does allow us to focus issues even about America there. And one of them is ESG and this Larry Fink fella, right? So Larry Fink being I'm just gonna check the audio. Let me know if the audio is doing okay. I'm back on this system today just because I didn't love the lag yesterday on the Bluetooth. I am gonna get a standing mic, just haven't had a chance yet. So I'm gonna try and not move my arms as much today. That should take care of it. So Bud says it's, thank you, Bud. So Larry Fink, people don't know. So this is one of the things that is great about with the WEF this year and the attention it's getting. Larry Fink being the BlackRock, and we talk about him a lot on the show. We've mentioned him as the actual of ESG. He is the guy who pushed it first, and he is the guy who we letter to shareholders, which everyone pays so much attention to. That should, by the way, I'll grab it if I can find it. Fink is the perfect name for him. So Larry Fink, one of these people, when you're looking at American politics or global politics, you've always got to imagine behind the person. Right? It's really important to do that because the frame that I use dealing with is almost like the Muggle and Wizard war Harry Potter, where the Muggles don't really understand what's happening, but they know something's going on. And on the other end, you've got these people with incantations and spells and magic and going at their war and kind of shadowy relationship with the Muggles. So I often think of these billionaires as those types of wizards where we're not really getting the true story filtering through. We can figure it out if you spend a bit of time. And Larry Fink is one of those guys, right? We don't really know what he's been funding over time. We don't really know what his motives are. He avoids attention. This isn't someone whose ego needs to be filled every day with admiration and all those other things. One of the things I love about seeing Biden, as doddering and stupid as he is now, is it looks like one of the greatest ironic punishments, a bit like what we mentioned earlier about having WEF people live in a Davos town and see how it goes and make a show about it. We're getting one of the great reality TV shows of all time with the comeuppance that Joe Biden is getting. I mean, this was one of the worst lying scammers in the history of the Senate. And he rose up to the level of vice president, and that was already quite an accomplishment for someone of his limited talents, right? This isn't the most talented person we've seen in Senate in American history. But as we've often said, the role picks the right person for the time, or the person fits the role of president for that time. And watching this guy malfunction, watching him melt down, watching him degenerate in front of us all, and that he can't hide it, is one of the great all-time punishments, I think, for someone with his track record, right? Watching him go every day, getting what you asked for, right? You are now the president, but really a steward, not exactly a president. Most people don't recognize you. And if we do ever pay attention to Joe Biden, it's not because he did something good. It's because his brain cracked and bullshit fell out. And that's what people want to see, right? So watching the reality show of doddering Biden is probably only going to be surpassed if we can get Fetterman in office, and we'll get sort of a replay of the degenerate brain as the leader of the free world, they say, right? So we're going to continue to push for 4 more years of Biden, and if we can't get it, we're going to get Fetterman. But the point is, watching this sort of play out is helpful, right? It's really helpful to see, and it is a type of cosmic punishment. And Larry Fink, who tried to hide and avoid what Biden's ego lured him into, right? I gotta be the president, right? He could have just gone and been quiet about Ukraine and the money and the big guy and all that other Hunter stuff. He didn't need any of this, but he had to come and beat Trump using the Charlottesville hoax as the angle. And Wizcat, I don't know how to pronounce the other part of your name. I can see Wizcat, and this is. Someone can help me, maybe. Steward, that's a good word for Biden. Yeah, Sticks, Hex, and Hammer only calls him the stewardship of Joe Biden. And there's a few people out there who do it. So I did not invent that, but I love it. I personally call him the steward, right? And definitely waiting for the return of the king. We're going to get into the return of the king, actually. That's part of what we're talking about today, because we're going to talk about World War I and what was destroyed. As someone who does come from a monarchy, by the way, as a Canadian, I had a queen. I don't recognize the new king at all, and don't have to. But I loved my queen, right? She was great in her time. And we'll talk about that in a second. So Larry Fink, here's a quote from him yesterday in Bloomberg. Oh, I froze. Bud said, I froze. Bitcoin graffiti in the house. Let me know if I'm still frozen, guys. I'm back. Okay. Let me know if anyone else saw that, because I shouldn't be freezing. This is pretty strong connection, but it happens. Stranger things happen. I'm good. Yeah. Okay, great. So Larry Fink, thought he could avoid the attention, thought he could orchestrate from the back room and create. And Dimini says, I can't tell if you're serious about Fetterman or if it's a deadpan joke. Well, it's the same thing, Indemnity. It's the same thing. Do I want him as president? Absolutely. It's not a joke. It would be great. It would be great for Bitcoin. And to change the role, right? We're already dealing with a president without a brain, and it's better than what we had with Trump from a certain point of view. I still think Trump's best day was his first day in office, and that's all we really needed, right? The cognitive dissonance of him getting elected in the first place. I said it as it was happening in 2017, whenever it was that he was inaugurated. I said, we can go home now. It's done. The job is done. Whatever happens in the 4 years now as president, don't make, because what we got out of the presidency on day one was enough. Now, we more lies piled on top of lies, but we don't need it. We didn't need Trump to get more of that, right? Like I said, I think day one was enough. Chase the rats out and get them to expose themselves and all those things. We saw the Russian Mueller investigation more or less begin in that period between his election and inauguration. And in fact, that's probably all we need in order to have a proper reading on who's in power in the United States, right? So everything that Trump did getting elected was achieved through the process of election and inauguration. From there on, everything that Trump did was sort of bonus, sort of funny, but ultimately too expensive from the point of view of, like, you have to defend him every day. Like, I don't want to defend him anymore, right? Like, I'm done defending Trump and deciphering what he said and what he meant and what this could do. And that's all fine. I mean, it's fine. But I don't want to have to do that on this show for years, explaining everything he did and meant and da. He was great in his time. He cracked the code, cracked the systemic practice of president, and changed and altered the course of the job. And Biden has done the same. So I'm a Biden supporter simply because of the low IQ. I think it's great, right? Trump broke the job. There's no way you can confuse Biden. Biden was already the shadow vice president. When I mean shadow, I mean lesser man than Obama. I mean, you choose a vice president to have a lesser person. You don't want the vice president to shine brighter than the president. Trump chose someone who was less bright than him. There is no president that's chosen a vice president who is stronger than they are, right? So watching the degradation of the role is great. And if Fetterman can get it next time, whoa, it's awesome. It would be great. So it's both a joke in the sense that I'm looking forward to the day where people say, this is a true story. I was at a birthday party this weekend, and there was an American parent there with our kids, and right away telling me, "Oh, I'm a New York Times subscriber." So I already know what I can and can't say. Basically, I'm not going to ruin a kid's party. But I'm looking for where I can connect with this person and all these things, right? Because right away he's pissed about Elon, he hates Bitcoin, as you can imagine. I mean, just lock and load as far as opinions go, glunk, and then it's just New York Times stuff. So when I said to him, I'm not shitting you guys, I'm not kidding. To make a connection, I said, well, I'm a Fetterman 2024 guy, and I am. And he goes, me too. I like that guy. He goes, he knows what he's doing. He meant it. He was serious. So am I. Now I didn't want to joke around about it, but I didn't tell him the joke part. But I'm serious. I would be fine with him as president. And then he says, you definitely see things in a different way than I can, and this is why I appreciate Roy. Thanks, Anthony. Thanks, I appreciate it. Bud says, the more clown the president, the more people can realize they are not running things. Exactly. That's what I'm coming at. And not only that, we didn't design the job of president to be the leader of the free world. This was a presupposition layered on top of the narrative that goes into World War I and World War II, which we're going to talk about in a second. So let me just tie this up with Larry Fink, and laugh for a second again at Joe Biden. And you get what you ask for in life sometimes. He got what he asked for, but now he's going to continue to be the punchline of all time. He can't just go retire as an 80-year-old man. He's a dementia-filled, clueless steward, and everybody sees it and everybody smells it, right? The poopy pants and all the other things, right? It's great. Imagine you're supposed to just go and retire. You've been a corrupt person your whole life. You could have gotten away with it. But someone says you can go be president, right? Wow, I can be the president. And then you go and do it. And it doesn't work out the way you thought, right? You shit yourself and everybody laughs at you and you don't know what's going on. You don't know where you are half the time. It's perfect, right? It's great. So Larry Fink was more clever than Biden. He thought he could get away with it. But Bloomberg has him on record today saying the following. And this is about everyone getting mad about ESG. Right? This is about everyone turning on ESG. This is what he says, right? He says, I'm taking this very seriously, Fink said in an interview with Bloomberg TV at Davos. We are trying to address the misconceptions. It's hard because it's not business anymore. They're doing it in a personal way. And for the first time in my professional career, attacks are now personal. They're trying to demonize the issues. So Larry Fink crying to Bloomberg saying, I didn't mean to be in the headlines. I came up with this scheme to make money, but they're not making it about not letting me do it. It's so bad. And then, you get other people yesterday like John Kerry, another one of these people who could have just disappeared. He could have just disappeared, right? No, he goes there and rants that he needs money to solve the climate change stuff, right? That's while everyone in the world right now is paying way more for energy. And this guy going, money. We love it, money, right? Exactly what we're going to talk about. So here's what, put that all in context, right? We're We're in the midst of World War III. We've got a president who is confused. We've got a Wall Street guy who's saying they shouldn't be talking about me because I designed it so they wouldn't talk about me. And then you get this other guy who ran for president, lost, and is also one of the great fake news purveyors going, John Kerry, saying money, 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 right? So how do we end up like this? How did we end up a bunch of people who are elite, but as we said yesterday, don't think of them as elite. Think of the people who benefit most from being close to the money printer, gathering, talking about how to use the money printer and all of this stuff in a certain way. Now, it's appropriate they meet in Switzerland, as far as I'm concerned. It's appropriate they meet in Switzerland. Why? Because if you go back to the history of World War I, you'll see that Switzerland plays a really important role in its neutrality, but also in its finance and banking. And what ends up happening, particularly with America involved, what ends up happening was broken down here by Jens Become Ungovernable. And what I wrote, it's in my description, his actual handle on Twitter, but I can't, the way I saved it here, it doesn't come up. Jens Become Ungovernable, and if you look, I retweeted this yesterday, and in the description, you'll also see his handle. I brought the handle there. I kept the handle there. So this is what he goes back and talks about World War I and Jekyll Island. We talk about Jekyll Island a lot here, right? The creature from Jekyll Island being the place where the US dollar was created. Now, as you know, we do events, right? Bitcoin Magazine does events, May 18th to 20th, Bitcoin 2023. But I have put out into the cosmos and have been talking about it for 2 years now. Oh, well, here's a few things. 2 years ago at Bitcoin 2021, I told everyone the following, right? Everybody, to manifest it, to make it real. That we had found Atlantis, like people I hadn't seen since COVID, right? Like, how are you doing Bitcoin? Oh, yeah, Bitcoin's great. Let's talk about Atlantis. And no one had ever seen the reshot structure, and no one had ever seen any of those things. I said, look, you can see the flooding, you can see where it happened, that's where it is. We're going to terraform Atlantis, and, you know, because I had put that in my book and it was something that I had in it, and I wanted to popularize the idea and start cultivating people talking about re-terraformation of Atlantis using nuclear energy and Bitcoin and other things, and finding the antediluvian culture, right? Antediluvian being before the flood, right? So the culture before the flood. And so I spoke about it with everyone. And now, 2 years later, right, what's happening? That's all anyone's talking about. You got Ancient Apocalypse on Netflix. You got Jimmy Corsetti on Joe Rogan today, right? He's back on Bright Insight, back on Joe Rogan today, I just saw. And he's gone totally onto this reshot structure is the lost city of Atlantis thing that I was just manifesting. I was telling everyone I'm doing it to manifest it, make it real. I'm telling you right now, I'm manifesting something again. I've done it for a year now. I told everyone at Bitcoin 2022 this, and it is coming in 2024 for the US presidential elections. We are going to do a Bitcoin show on Jekyll Island. And we are going to bury the bad energy of the dollar at that event. And Kanye West, yay, is going to be a keynote at that event. I promise you. He's going to be a keynote at that event. And it's going to be all about the 2024 election. We're going to go Jekyll Island being off the coast of Savannah, Georgia. Again, where the US dollar was created. So we're going to talk about that right now. So Jen's Become Ungovernable. Don't know his handle. Check my description for it. You've been lied to. World War I didn't start with the assassination of Franz Ferdinand. It started on Jekyll Island. World War I was the first great reset and has given way to the New World Order and globalists to rule the world. Allow me to explain. And indeed, you have to understand World War I. World War II was sort of a mop-up as far as I can tell. World War I is where the real conflict began and the real change in order happened. And I've thought that before I read this thread and for a long time. World War I is where things really get going. So here's what he says. The mainstream narrative wants you to believe that the bloodiest war in human history was fought because of the assassination of the Archduke. Anybody with a brain can already see right through this deceit. Most of the problems in the world today can be traced back to Jekyll Island, where a private group of bankers and powerful people met and established the Federal Reserve. 3 people at that meeting opposed this. All 3 died in the Titanic shortly after. World War I can also trace its roots back to Jekyll Island. The Federal Reserve Act was passed in 1913. The bloodiest war in human history started in 1914. Just one big coincidence, eh? Not so fast. With the Federal Reserve, the communist fight that was ongoing in Russia had now overcome the United States. A debt-based monetary system is foundational to Marxism. The Federal Reserve had now just enslaved all users of the dollar under communism. At the same time, the Allied nation states would stop redeeming dollars for gold. The poisoning of the monetary system had begun. While loaning money to private citizens can be profitable, usury, the loan of money to world governments is exponentially more profitable. Now, with the death of sound money, the private interests of the Federal Reserve could control entire world governments. Woodrow Wilson said this of the Federal Reserve. And I'm no fan of Woodrow Wilson, by the way. I am a most unhappy man. I have unwittingly ruined my country. The great industrial nation is now controlled by its system of credit. We are no longer a government by free opinion, no longer a government by conviction and the vote of the majority, but a government by the opinion and duress of a small group of dominant men. Now remember, Woodrow Wilson was the Joe Biden of his time. Woodrow Wilson was the last president to have no real brain function, right? He had a stroke in office and was handicapped for all intents and purposes after, completely handicapped. Oh, there, Endemnity shared it here. Yeah, so it's never compromise on Jekyll Island and WW1. He says, I assume you're going to invite, yeah, I'm definitely going to invite G.E. Griffin. So I guess Bitcoin Graffiti, you're talking about, that's a crazy idea for the Jekyll Island show. Yeah, it's going to happen. I mean, I said to everyone at the show last year, I'm doing it. I'm producing this show. And people would say, ugh. But more and more people are like, yeah, that would work, right? So I'm just manifesting it. I have no plan. I haven't rented Jekyll Island. I haven't rented the venue, none of that stuff, but you can rent it. I found out you can rent it. There's some dark things if you read The Creature of Jekyll Island, by the way. But we're going to do it. So Woodrow Wilson, the last president to be not all there, right? So here's how become ungovernable continues. The people behind the Federal Reserve could now profit massively off of a world of governments and are incentivized to throw nations into never-ending wars. The more debt a nation takes to fight endless wars, the more money the people behind the Fed make. Saifedean said it best in the Bitcoin Standard regarding endless wars. With a simple suspension of gold redeemability, governments' war efforts were no longer limited to the money that they had in their own treasuries, but extended virtually to the entire wealth of the population. For as long as the government could print more money and have that money accepted by its citizens and foreigners, it could keep financing war. Previously, under a monetary system where gold as money was in the hands of people, government only had its own treasuries to sustain its war effort, along with any taxation or bond issues to finance the war. This made conflict limited and lay at the heart of the relatively long periods of peace experienced around the world before the 20th century. What should have been a short conflict after the murder of an archduke now became a world war, all thanks to the Fed. Wouldn't stop until all of the debt-based fiat nations could destroy of the gold standard in Germany and Austria. While Germany and Austria offered peace many times throughout the war, the incentive to enslave entire nations of people under this debt-based currency was too great to forego. The goal of World War I was to destroy the stable, prosperous, moral kingdoms of the 19th century and to replace them with the debt-based slavery system that governs the whole world today. After the loss of the war, Germany would experience incredible amounts of hyperinflation. Their money had become worthless. This inflation led to the moral degradation of Germany. Berlin became a cesspit of prostitution, bestiality, and transgenderism. Simultaneously, Marxist Bolshevism, funded by banks, was attacking the Russian Empire. The Russian Tsar was murdered by foreign Bolsheviks, together with his family and his daughters, who were stabbed to death. The communist takeover of Russia led to 66 million Russian deaths and the most horrendous acts to ever occur in human history. The communists created such a great famine. I'm not going to repeat the next. Dissenters, not going to talk about that either. Some of this stuff's too gross. I can understand why Russia today would be adversarial towards globalist organizations, creeping ever closer to them. World War I was the Great Reset. It subverted nation states to the globalists in the EU, WEF, NATO, and the UN. It was a war posed, funded, and fought by the people behind the Federal Reserve. It was not the war of German aggression and had little or nothing to do with the Archduke. It had everything to do with world domination and the NWO. And indeed, that looks like what happened, right? So we can see gold making a limited amount of capacity for a nation state to go to war. They had to tax, they had to do all those things. Not simple, right? But once you turn money into debt, right? Once you turn it from gold into this, it's still not money. It's still not money. And as I've said before, there was a tweet thread we talked about yesterday where Elon Musk said, money is just databases, COBOL, blah, 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 blah. And I said, well, that's why Satoshi invented money, right? I'm in the world where we never had money before. It's a new thing. We had things that acted like money, invented money. Now, what I mean is the old definitions of money were really just money looking in the mirror and seeing what it sees back. It's a unit of account, it's a thing, it's a blah, it's a transactions, store of value, right? This is all just looking in the mirror. And you saw what the coordination of technology was able to produce on systems and people. But that's not exactly money, right? Now, it worked as money. It worked as money, right? I'm not saying we didn't have functional money for years. We did, of course. Gold can work as money very, very well. But it still isn't money, right? It's not money. It's close enough that it's money, but it's not exactly it. What we did here worked for a while too, right? We created, instead of what we think of as dollars being money, right? It was a system of the petrodollar, which was the war machine, combined with the actual energy resource and the single market around the petrodollar. So only dollars for oil, right? That created the demand for the dollar. And you had human institutions, right? They also combined legal systems, guards, banks, all those things. They combined with these systems to, create another plank that allowed us to have a facsimile of money. And finally, housing and the store of value piece, which became a huge component of store of value in the dollar system because the dollar didn't hold value. So we put a bunch of attention into real estate and a bunch of energy into real estate as the best way to save your money, right? Have a house, and which is not bad advice technically, right? It's not bad advice. It was common sense for most boomers because that's the system they came up with. And in the end, this looks much like Jason Lowery's document comparing physical power and the composite of goods that created money beforehand. So the legal system, in his case, I think he put gold as part of it, right? But he meant like assets, stocks, and things like that. I think in the more detailed version, housing being a part of it. But it was energy, war machine, and institutions and housing that really created money. Right? That was money, which is great, right? It worked for a long time. Yeah, here's a nice quote from Joe. I learned nothing about World War I in school. Bitcoin naturally inspires education. Yeah, it's a big theme of our show in Miami this year, actually. It's especially financial literacy, right? Financial literacy has been provoked by Bitcoiners way more than any other course, system, schooling, or anything like that, right? And what is the Bitcoin rabbit hole? I've said it before in this. It's a reading list. It's like content, right? It's sharing content. That's the rabbit hole. It's literally content, educational content. And on that note, I booked Corey DeAngelis for the show yesterday. So he is a confirmed speaker. We haven't announced it yet, but you'll get the inside scoop here on who's speaking at the show. Corey DeAngelis being one of the great organizers around the charter school movement, which just ran rampant across America during COVID and has deregistered most states from the National Student School Union, Teachers Union Federation, and is offering the sort of prescriptive model to have school choice across the country, right? So this is one of the best organizers going, and he's a Bitcoiner, not really out there that much, but one of the things I'm going to induce him in the next run of Bitcoin is really to appreciate Bitcoin's role in the spread of financial literacy. So I've got the ask out to Ron DeSantis right now as well, the governor of Florida, not for any of the other stuff he's doing, in particular, just for his high school education program where he made financial literacy requisite to graduate from high school in Florida. And I think that's one of the most clever civilization-changing policies that have ever happened, and no one talks about it enough. So if I can get those two guys to talk about Bitcoin's huge success in spreading financial literacy, like no program has ever even come close to what Bitcoin has achieved in spreading financial literacy. And don't feel bad. I see here, I learn nothing and inspires education. Like I say regularly, like I was a trained lawyer and a researcher on the Senate Banking Committee with some of the best education you can get. I was a financial illiterate. Like I didn't know anything until Bitcoin. And then he asks, can the conference be attended online? Absolutely. We have a full feed all day, I think free. I don't think we've ever charged for it, of the event virtual. It's not the entire event, as in you get one feed at a time. So you don't get every stage at once. You get a feed that follows certain things, mostly the main stage, but it does go to other places. It will go to where you'll find me, which is a news desk, right? We run a news desk, which goes back and forth between stages, really like a kind of sports situation, something I designed. We put on the expo floor, and I mean, something I designed. I've been trying to get this done for a while, and other people at Bitcoin Magazine were definitely involved around. The idea did not come from me, but something I've been trying to produce for a long time, and not everyone got, and I was someone who understood immediately we should just copy sports broadcasting, because they're some of the best broadcasters in the world, right? And we do it a bit like a sports broadcast situation, where we have this news desk and we cover all the stages, react to things on stage. If someone says something stupid, we can address it on the news desk. So we were able to create pretty interesting content for those reasons. So World War I sets this situation up where we've got all of these different pieces that act as money together in their coordination and the orchestration, using human laws, human institutions, the intertwining of oil and the military-industrial complex and the communications machine, along with real estate, created this situation where we have the modern economic system, debt-based, as we've seen in the breakdown of World War I. Where do we find ourselves today, right? Where do we find ourselves today? Well, remember, you can think of the economy, for a second, forget about all the science behind it. Just like I said, money, right? The definition. If you hear these definitions of money, right? It's people looking in the mirror and seeing what they've already seen, what's already there, and just getting a reflection back, right? That's not really the definition of money. In the end, the definition of money is whatever you want. Now, it can't just be you, because you need two parties and you need to have a network that comes around with it. But nevertheless, the easiest way to understand economics and economic systems is like this. It's what I use. It's what I think is the easiest to intellectualize, and that is that it's a psychological engine, right? It's just a psychological engine. And if people believe in it, and if they have incentives and they want it and they like it, and everyone agrees, and your agreement and my agreement create this fiction, which becomes reality, then the whole psychology will propagate forward, right? So you need the psychological engine to believe and have trust and have optimism and have the capacity to imagine the future in order to design it and build it and go there. And then the machine will perpetuate itself, and you'll find yourself in the future with the things that you worked for. Now, this system was heavily psychologically based. Heavily psychological. When people say, "Oh, Bitcoin is a psychological commodity," of course it is. Of course it is. It always was. It's, you can say proof of work, and that's just part of the psychology. Nevertheless, it's a psychological commodity. But so is money, the dollar, right? So is the dollar. These are all psychological commodities. The euro is a psychological commodity. The yen is a psychological commodity, and all these things together can express the psychology of the system that they're perpetuating. They're involved together. They're related, right? So what's happening while all this is going on? Well, amazing things are happening. Amazing things are happening with the system. I don't know if they're good for you or good for me, but they're happening. And one of them is housing, which was integral to this system, is falling apart. We get Ben Record saying the real estate collapse is now entering mainstream consciousness. You get Nick Gurley here saying the KB Homes, a large home builder, just reported a 68% cancel rate, meaning that over 2/3 of home buyers walked away from their contracts in the quarter, leaving KB Homes with a massive pileup of inventory. They had a 13% cancel rate last year, and they've never had anything in their entire history over 28%. So that is a much larger spike, much larger spike. So I don't know the future of real estate, right? I know that it doesn't look good. And if you're thinking about the psychological engine of this, well, that's one thing that's uncertain. And uncertainty in the psychological engine is not good, right? What's happening next? Well, this war machine petrodollar thing. Well, what's going on with that? Well, they do actually have cool things at WEF sometimes. And one of the cool things they had yesterday was Saudi Arabia. There's news at events, right? You can't deny the WEF can still generate headlines. And they had Mohammed Al-Jadan yesterday. And what did he say? Well, he said that Saudi Arabia is opening to settling trade in any other currency, right? Or other currencies, they said, but not just the dollar. This is a major change. Wall Street Silver underlines the Saudis are a pillar of the petrodollar system established in the 1970s that relies on pricing crude exports in the US currency. They are now willing to settle oil trades in yuan, euros, dollars, and other currencies. If the Saudis do this, others will follow. So we get this whole petrodollar system now psychologically not in the same boat that it was before. You get, let me see, I got some more here. You know, just adding to institutional argument here, you've got Microsoft with 11,000 job cuts yesterday. 11,000 job cuts. Wow. Then you get this story about the demographics of China, right? Yesterday we learned, and it's probably not accurate, but yesterday was the first time we found out that in 2022, there were more deaths in China than births. So it's the first time the population is starting to come down officially. And some people say it's been going on for like 10 years now. Wall Street Silver weighs in on that. China has been supplying the world with cheap labor for the past 40 plus years, which was a key to USA low inflation during that period. Demographics in China are rapidly with the population shrinking. We are probably not going back to 2% inflation. So it's a small little point, right? But add that on top of what we heard from housing, what we've heard from oil and the war machine, and now this institutional argument. There's more on the institutional argument, and that is the Japanese element to the system, which is, you know, Japan being one of the largest holders of U.S. debt, one of the largest experimenters from the central bank point of view with quantitative easing and those things, now falling into really tough times because no one is coming for their bond sales. So what we're seeing here is Japan. Let me see if I have the thing. What we're seeing here is Japan basically, putting up their bonds for sale and no one's buying them. So a big part of how this works is sovereign debt, right? So this institutional thing with sovereign debt as one of the main anchors for perpetuating the dollar system globally, also cracking, right? And you can see it further. It's not just Japan, right? What's going on in France, right? Protests everywhere for farming and food, right? Now, think of the Japanese situation again for a second, right? When a sovereign debt default is imminent, no one will buy the bonds. And if no one buys the bonds, then they've got to print more money, and then no one will take the money, right? So it can start spiraling really quickly. So these are some of the most important features of the petrodollar system that are just washing away before our very eyes, right? And then you can take it one step further, right? You can say what Kim.com said today about this de-dollarization and financial troubles around the world. Kim.com says, we are witnessing the accelerated fall of an empire. This year, expect major escalation with Russia and China for driving global de-dollarization. When the US can no longer fund its debt with money printing, it will collapse under the weight of its current debt. It's happening now. I don't know if he's exactly right? I don't know if he's exactly right. But you get people like Allianz Bernstein, right? This is one of the largest bond buyers in the world. not buying the Japanese bonds, right? So the dominoes are moving towards America quickly, according to many people. But then you can even think, right, this sort of systemic, the systemic system, so that doesn't make sense. This system of propagating the dollar as the psychological engine based on these tenets, right, the petrodollar, housing, institutional strength, can also be subverted in another way, right? Now, we don't know if this is true, but everyone yesterday talking about the hacking of FAA, the air authority system, saying it happened in Canada the day after it happened in the United States. Some people tying in Bitcoin because Tucker Carlson did a show on, did the US government buy Bitcoin to pay the ransom? So I don't know any of that. Joshua Steinman here breaks it down. It looks like maybe not, right? He argues this. I'm not arguing one way or the other. We don't know. He says some thoughts on this, right? So this is the idea that $5 or $6 billion of Bitcoin was bought by the US government to pay ransoms to get the air system back up and running. And then that $5 or $6 billion of Bitcoin was what caused the price increase. Maybe. Here's what Joshua Steinman says. He goes, what size transaction would cause a 10% bump in US dollar Bitcoin price? This is an oddly, so he's commenting on Tucker Carlson's point of view. This is an oddly specific mole hunt smelling conjecture. We couldn't keep UBL rate a secret, keeping it quiet that USG paid ransom system equals unusual. He's talking here about how it would be possible to drive Bitcoin that much in a day. He says probably not enough. The recent volume on that day was about 41.7 billion being bought anyway. So the 6 billion, not that clear. And here's what Joshua Simon says. Allow me to be more explicit. I think someone sold Tucker on a yarn, and I wonder why. Now, we don't have to know the answer to that. Okay, we don't need to know the answer to that. The point is, though, that centralized systems like that will continue to come under attack. And whether or not Bitcoin benefits, we don't know. But just like that argument around the electrical grid being attacked, this is kind of similar. These are physical systems financed by that old psychological engine that didn't care if they were building centralized systems like a centralized grid or centralized system like a centralized air communications protocol, right? They just built these systems. But isn't it funny that these things can be attacked easily by people who understand why you'd want to use Bitcoin for ransom anyway, right? You see the connection here? They don't have to be Bitcoiners. They understand and are incentivized to attack centralized systems, get paid in Bitcoin. And that loop is pretty good for changing the whole system over. And so now when we think, of the slogan at WEF, right? You'll own nothing and you'll be happy, right? Some people say that's the slogan, even though it's kind of a scam, right? You'll own nothing and be happy. Well, they're almost right? They're almost right. I don't think any of this stuff is going to have value any longer once we have the mind shift to understand what money really is, now that money's been invented and is not a composite of old systems, right? Now that we understand that money is this beautiful, incentivized system of proof of work mining and database that's held by those miners and therefore has no single point of failure, that system itself, being the invention of money, becomes the only thing you'll actually need to own. You won't need to own anything else. None of that stuff is actually worth anything, right? It's not worth anything. Houses, yeah, maybe a really nice place on the water could maintain a high value, but should housing be where you put all of your savings, right? That creates the barrier we're currently struggling with. I mean, what's the number one anxiety in America? It's this house buying thing. And we're still good compared to the world as far as how much of our yearly salary is required to buy a house. I think it's like 4 or 5 years right now of the average US salary will buy you the average US home, right? That's not bad compared to some places in the world, but it's still untenable. It's still awful, and Americans are struggling, right? So there you go, right? That's what we got. That's what we got. So indemnity, amazing. Yeah, you'll be able to see tons indemnity. As I said, it's not the entire show. It's not the entire show, but it's enough. I mean, you're not going to have to see every little stage and every little thing. You'll get the most interesting run of show, and mostly the main stage stuff. And the interludes on the news desk are a lot of fun. You'll see a lot of stuff there. Sort of everyone comes through the news desk, right? You know, if they're a speaker, they'll come through and be an analyst and all that stuff. Bitcoin for these pump stream. Yeah. All right, team. Hope everyone's good. Hope everyone's having a great day. Right? We're going to see you all tomorrow. Right? The simulation winking all over the place, making good outcomes for Bitcoiners, right? We love it. All right, peace, team.